We have Dr. Harin Kanani, who is the MD at Neogen Chemicals, to discuss more. And I want to get in your perspective as to what some of the significant opportunities are that you see in the battery ecosystem, particularly for the EV space in terms of the challenges as well as the growth levers.
In India, it first started with a FAME policy, FAME 1, then which was followed up with FAME 2. And of course, the Indian government was very committed to make sure that the entire supply chain comes here. So when they realized that, especially for the battery, significant investment is needed, and they came up with ACC PLI scheme around 2 years ago. So that's when we saw the lithium and battery side increase basically to support the EV industry. So the way EV industries has shaped up in last 4 or 5 years in India, we see the demand constantly increase. So if I talk in terms of batteries, what we feel that the lithium and battery demands has now reached almost close to 8 to 10 gigawatt hour equivalent of batteries are used, and that much demand exists even today because the EV numbers have increased, and mainly the penetration in two-wheelers and three-wheelers has been very fast. And four-wheelers also have penetrated significantly, and we see this constant demand. So I think this has been a very positive sign, and we see a lot of commitment both from the government at the policy level, as well as we hear a lot of positive feedback even from consumers that they are also ready to adapt and they see the value in adopting to EV. So I think this is something which we have seen both in India as well as internationally. Also, more and more countries and more companies and regions are getting more and more serious about EVs. Overall, if we see the 6 or 7 years journey, where we were when we started thinking about this way back in 2018-19, today there's a lot more seriousness. Almost all the regions are talking of 30%, 40%, and even 50% vehicles on the road, new vehicle sales on the road coming from EV based instead of the normal gasoline based by 2030. So I think that's a significant penetration. And in India, if this assumptions are basically materialized, people are expecting a battery capacity of somewhere around 150 to 250 gigawatt hour. And worldwide, the expectation is roughly around 3,000 gigawatt hours.
Right. And China is flooding components, especially in the EV sector, as we understand. Any kind of domestic injury is expected for the Indian chemical companies, you think?
Majority of EVs were being made in China, and even a higher portion of batteries were being made in China. So even higher portion of battery materials was getting processed in China. But as the world demand in other, and one of the major reasons was also that from a consumer side also, the largest penetration of EV was also in China. So even though Europe and other markets are also serious about EVs, but China was where the penetration was the highest, and because of that, the market was highest. So what is usually estimated is, almost 60-70% of almost 50-60% of EVs were being made in China, and between 60 to 80% of batteries were being made in China. And in some cases, for some specific battery raw materials, almost 85, 90, 95% of the battery raw materials were being made in China. But all regions basically realize that as EV industry grows, as the scale comes in each domestic consumption increases, just as it's increasing in India, and similarly in Europe and US, there are several steps being taken to proactively basically support local manufacturing of the majority of the supply chain. Like basically sometimes natural resources like lithium, and in some cases when you are using nickel or cobalt, they are located in, let's say South America, or some elements are specifically in Africa or Australia. So that can't be controlled. But almost all regions want that the entire value chain after mining happens in their own region. So US also has taken some steps around that. In India's ACC PLI also, what they have done is they have created minimum 60% value addition has to happen in India. And that was one of the factor on which ACC PLI recipients were decided. So there was a lot of encouragement by the governments all across the world to support local manufacturing of this chemical components.
Any large client additions expected in Q1 FY25? What is the kind of global opportunities are there for the company?
So, as a company, we have basically two kind of opportunities. One is the India, which remains our main focus long term. Because we believe India, the gigawatt hours will keep increasing once the initial few companies start. And also there's a very strong local demand. And also India can be a very good base for international market for some of these EV vehicles. India also exports a lot of vehicles. So similarly, EV vehicles also India can be a good location for exports. And similarly, maybe some of the batteries which we are today importing from, let's say, Korea or Japan or China, once India becomes sufficient, we can also export that. And similarly for battery materials as well. In fact, for battery materials, the opportunity exists even today, because even now, with the decoupling from China or China plus one policies which different regions have, they are really wanting to have a non-China based supply chain. And I think they have always realized that India is a very good location, especially when it comes to specialized chemistry. So as I mentioned, we start from the mine, and then we do 3 or 4 stage of processing where we reach finally at an electrolyte, which basically goes inside the cell manufacturing. So for each stage, there are international companies which are interested to source this from India, and in specifically, Neogen. So as well as, the domestic companies are starting. So we have started with, we've set up in our first phase in our existing site, a capacity which is going to support up to 3 gigawatt of production, let's say, to begin with. And we are increasing the capacity of the salt for the international market, as well as in future, by next year, we will have almost something which will support 30 to 40 gigawatt hour of electrolyte and battery production, electrolyte and electrolyte salts for that.
Okay. And what kind of revenue potential is expected then over the next 3 to 5 years for the EV and the ancillary products around it?
So Neogen has announced capex, which we are going to do at our existing site, and then setting up a new greenfield site of almost 65 acres for this purpose. We have announced a capex of around 1,500 crores, which we already started last year, and we will complete in this and next financial year, majority of this. And the whole capacity which will come online on a full utilization level by FY28 or FY29 can give us a revenue potential somewhere between 2,500 crore to 2,900 crore. This is just the EV business alone, mix of electrolyte and electrolyte salts.
All right. Really appreciate your time and glad you could join us.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.